Hey y'all, it's Crystal. Thanks so much for coming by today. I just want to do a little book chat because I've just finished a book a couple of days ago and absolutely blown away. It has catapulted to an all-time fave, and I just want to talk about it a little bit. So like these little book chats, I don't necessarily consider them reviews. They're just thoughts about, sort of rambly thoughts about my feelings about the book. Yeah, so this is how this will go. So of course I'm talking about Kim Jiyoung, born 1982. This is by Cho Nam-Joo. It is translated by Jamie Chung, translated from the Korean by Jamie Chung. So this was first released in South Korea in 2016, and the American edition came out in 2020. So it's been a few years here in the States, and I've been wanting to get to it for a little while. You know how we do. Oh, I really want to read that book, and 10 years later we finally read it, right? So I finally got to it for K-Tropathon, where a reading event where we focused on kind of digging into some Korean things. And so I said, perfect opportunity to finally get to this one. It's a nice short little book. Yeah, it was great. So I'm going to actually just read you the synopsis because I feel it's really important, actually, and really sums up the book really well. So here we go. Set in modern-day Korea, Kim Jiyoung, born 1982, mesmerizingly diagnoses the endemic misogyny and institutional oppression that is relevant to us all. Truly, flawlessly, completely, she became that person. In a small, tiny apartment on the outskirts of the frenzied metropolis of Seoul lives Kim Jiyoung. A 30-something millennial every woman, she has recently left her white-collar desk job in order to care for her newborn daughter full-time, as so many Korean women are expected to do. But Jiyoung quickly begins to exhibit strange symptoms that alarm her husband, parents, and in-laws. She impersonates the voices of other women, alive and even dead, both known and unknown to her. As she plunges deeper into the psychosis, her discomfited husband sends her to a male psychiatrist. In a chilling, eerily truncated third-person voice, Ji-young's entire life is recounted to the psychiatrist, a narrative infused with disparate elements of frustration, perseverance, and submission. Born in 1982 and given the most common name for Korean baby girls, Ji-young quickly becomes the unfavored sister to her princeling little brother. Always her behavior is policed by the male figures around her, from the elementary school teachers who enforce strict uniforms for girls to the co-workers who install a hidden camera in the women's bathroom and post their photos online. In her father's eyes, it is Ji-young's fault that men harass her late at night. In her husband's eyes, it is Ji-young's duty to forsake her career, to take care of him and their child, to put them first. Ji-young's painfully common life is juxtaposed against a backdrop of an advancing Korea as it abandons family planning, birth control policies, and passes new legislation against gender discrimination. But can her doctor flawlessly, completely cure her, or even discover what truly ails her? And that's the book. And so let me just do an author photo. There's Cho Nam-Joo. Yeah. So let's see. She's a former television scriptwriter. This book, is an international bestseller, translated into 18 languages, and I'm so glad. I'm so glad that it was translated, obviously. So, I just what I loved about this book is it is sort of fiercely feminist, while being absolutely upfront and brutal with the reality of what it is actually like to live in in sort of modern day society, and expectations of girls, women, all that kind of good stuff. Even as we like to think that our society is progressive and things are so much better, kind of they really aren't. And the weight that is placed on women's shoulders is still very hefty. And that is what we see in this book. So right in the beginning of the book, we open up. Ji-young is kind of in her early 30s, and she's been married for a few years, and like the synopsis said, she has just had a baby, and she's struggling. She's really struggling with how I view it is just how her life has turned out. And because she did have her own goals and things like that as well, and now those things have been set aside because of expectations that have been placed on her. And then as we sort of shift throughout the book, and all of this is essentially being told through she visits this psychiatrist in the beginning of the book, and all of this story is sort of essentially being told to this psychiatrist, and we follow her as she's born into the family that she's born in. We see her early childhood into sort of teenage years, her time in university, some dating as she gets into her 20s, and then as she finally gets married. So it's kind of her life, right? And it also kind of backtracks a little bit to the life of her mother. So there's a generational sort of story as well, and how even kind of the more things change, the more things stay the same, kind of thing, with with sort of, again, familial pressures especially, and again how society and of course, as we're specifically focused on South Korea, so as South Korean society views the place of women, and the birth of a girl just being not quite as celebratory as the birth of a boy, all that's in here. But this, I think what is most important to me, and why I think why this resonated so much with me, is that this is just a South Korean story. Yeah, this is a story that is absolutely can be, anywhere, any place. Kim Jiyoung is everyone, and I think as it's mentioned, she has named Kim Jiyoung the most basic of basic everyday names of a woman in Korea. And so that right there, Kim Jiyoung is an every woman. And even this cover, which I love, she's faceless here, right? And so she's just almost like this empty vessel with which we can fill our own stories, because there's so many things throughout this where I'm like, yeah, absolutely, yes, oh my gosh, yes, that is me too, or I felt this at one time, or that happened exactly to me, or all of this stuff. I felt so seen in this book. And I will say particularly the motherhood bits, as she is, struggling with motherhood and the things that she's have to give up for her own self. I'm like, yes, absolutely. And also, just to backtrack a little bit, one thing I love about this is the author sort of interspersed some real data of numbers and stats and things like that, that she kind of wove in throughout the story, and which I thought was really interesting. And there's footnotes, and she's got where she pulled it, what article she pulled it from, or whatever. So that is in here too. And again, I think that's what makes it a bit more realistic, because even though this is a fiction book, I think this could absolutely be an autobiography of any sort of nameless, faceless woman living in a sort of, we'll say, more advanced sort of society, right? But I said that wrong. More advanced. That's not what I meant, but you know what I'm saying. What was I going to say? Oh, the motherhood bits, right? That is what absolutely resonated with me more. The loss of identity of when you become a mom, and the things that you do have to give up, or not have to, but things that just fall by the wayside. Hobbies that you had, or a work that you enjoyed, that now like Kim Jiyoung, she's has quit her job because that's what's expected of her, as do so many women that this happens to. And it got me thinking even about, when COVID was around, the year that was 2020. And, when all of our kids were having to be, schooled at home. And I remember hearing all these numbers about how many women actually just quit their jobs that year, because who was going to stay home? Who was going to do it? Right? And it was an expectation that, of course, primarily women would probably be responsible for that, right? Because again, even though we like to think we are in this wonderfully progressive world and everything's rainbows and unicorns, it's kind of not. If you dig a little deep and you get to that underbelly of things are still very much the same. And it makes you angry, it makes you sad. I cried in this book. I could cry right now thinking about it. I'm not gonna do that. Let me hold it back. Okay. So let me read you a few little things that I marked in here. Let me find what I was looking for. Okay. So this is right curve in this first, the first little bit here where her husband is like noticing some changes in Jiyoung. She's like, Jiyoung's you losing it. I don't understand what's going on. So her husband Daehyun visited the psychiatrist alone to discuss Jiyoung's symptoms and treatment options. He told his wife, who didn't seem to be aware of her condition, that he had booked a therapy session for her since she hadn't been sleeping well and seemed stressed. Jiyoung thanked him, saying that she had indeed been feeling blue, and innervated that she suspected maternity blues. Because of course, it's always the maternity blues or the postpartum blues, right? So here's another little thing that I marked. Let me try to remember. I usually underline, but this is a library book, but I will be buying a copy of this book. Oh my god, and reading it again and highlighting and marking and blah blah blah, because it's so good. So here's like I said, she's got a little footnote here of something here. So what I just thought was interesting was in 2001 in South Korea, and this is the year that Kim Jiyoung turned 20, as far as the story goes, the Ministry of Gender Equality was formed in Korea. It goes on to say, but in certain pivotal moments in women's lives, the woman stigma reared its head to obscure their vision, stay their hands, and hold them back. The mixed signals were confusing and disconcerting. And that's, again, something why I just, we are told that we are fed this line as women of, we can do it all. Especially as a Gen Xer, I feel like we really have that pressure throughout the sort of, if you're born like 70s and 80s and, coming up through the 90s of, yeah, you can do anything. Like you can have it all. You can go to college, you can get a really fantastic, amazing job, you can get married and you can have kids and it's going to be great. And it's kind of a load of BS because at the same time, those societal pressures are still on us to, they're still like, who's going to raise the baby and who's going to clean the house and who's going to cook the food. These are all still things that are expected of us, right? Whether we like it or not, whether we put up with it or not, but I'm just saying these pressures from societal pressures are still very much there. So let's move on. What else did I... just a note here I thought was interesting. Another one of her sort of actual data that she wove into the story, that the gender pay gap in Korea is the highest among OECD countries. And so this is 2014 data. Women working in Korea earn 63% of what men earn. I thought that's really bad. The OECD average is 84. So 63, yeah, that's pretty abysmal. Korea was also ranked as the worst country in which to be a working woman, receiving the lowest scores among the nations surveyed on the Glass Ceiling Index by The Economist. How can Korea be the worst? That was surprising to me, but also not surprising as I'm reading this book, right? So what else did I mark here? So according to the book in here, again, this is a fiction story, but in 2014, around the time that Kim Jiyoung left the company, 1 in 5 married women in Korea quit their job because of marriage, pregnancy, childbirth, and childcare, or the education of their young children. And this is also something else that really resonated with me, was this guilt. This guilt of when you have a baby that is still there and, you want to go back to work because you still, again, either you have to, like I have to work because capitalism, but I got bills to pay, so I have to work. But And so when when we put like when we finally, because my mom helped us out in a lot in the beginning, but he was maybe like a year and a half, and I don't remember exactly how old he was, and we finally had to put him into daycare, and how it's terrible. And then when I went back to work full time, and my baby was like 8 weeks old, and I'm not spending the full day with him, and like there's a guilt. There's absolutely guilt, but also at the same time, remember, you can have it all. You can work. You can still work, and you probably should still work because you don't want to be a deadbeat. Because again, capitalism. Anyway, so like this is something else that just really was a gut punch to me. As far as it again, it's just these mixed signals that we consistently get, and it's frustrating. Okay. And what I thought was so interesting is the very last chapter is 2016, which is when the book was actually published. It's totally from the perspective of this male psychologist. And he's talking like, she came in, and I just thought, postnatal blues, she'll be okay. I'll go prescribe her something, she'll be okay. But then like, oh gosh, as I'm hearing her story, and I'm like, oh wow, and he thought he was so cool because his wife kind of dealt with some of the same things. But at the end of it all, this last sentence, which I'm not going to spoil, the last thing that he says though in this chapter makes me want to knock his teeth out, because even after hearing all of this, it didn't sink in, and he didn't understand. I didn't even try to understand. It's frustrating. But anyway, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling now because this video's gotten a bit long. I just want to say that I love this book. I think this almost should be required reading. It is, again, the writing style is very blunt, almost even kind of dry at times. It is just presenting us with Kim Jiyoung's life. Her life is just like a lot of other people's lives. It's not necessarily, extraordinary or outstanding. It's just day-to-day things. And so in this, very much presented in that way, again, through a third person. So there's almost a detachment from her, but also, like I said, because it is presented, I think, in this way, in this particular writing style, like I just put myself right here. Like I am Kim Jiyoung, and everything is just like, yes, I absolutely understand every single word in this book, and I feel it deeply within my heart and my soul and my stomach and everything. And so yeah, I love this book. It has absolutely catapulted to a new all-time fave. I will reread it probably over and over and over again. I loved it. So if it sounds something that you would like to read, absolutely give it a go. Even if it doesn't, read it. I really wish everyone would read it. I really think it could resonate with just about anyone, and maybe be a bit eye-opening for some folks. All right, so that's it for me today. Thanks so much for spending some time with me and letting me ramble on about this book. But yeah, I appreciate your time as always, and until next time, bye friends.